Hello, everybody. This is Fimpide News Network, and I'm host Daniel Dibaba. In today's program, I will present to you today's U.S. Foreign Affairs Democrats Committee hearing on Ethiopia. In today's program, I'll briefly comment on the U.S. Foreign Affairs Committee hearing that focused on human rights in Ethiopia. In the hearing, U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa and USAID's Deputy Assistant Administrator, Mr. Tyler Beckelman, respond to questions from the Committee on the State of Human Rights in Ethiopia and the U.S. policy on Ethiopia. They emphasize that Ethiopia is leaning towards Russia for political directions, but towards the West for financial support, and that Ethiopia is unable to pay is nearly $30 billion debts, $30 billion financial debt. Some members asked what the U.S. government is doing to pressure IMF to link its loans to the situation of human rights in Ethiopia. And Ambassador Mike Hammer said he was on a peace negotiations between the OLA, and the Ethiopian government in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. He just came back from the negotiation last week. And he said he emphasized during the talks that there was no military solution to the conflict in Oromia and also in Amara region. So I will broadcast a clip from that meeting, but also have put the links in our description so that you can watch the full program on YouTube. So we'll directly.
Africa will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to examine the current state of United States policy towards Ethiopia. The chair will also remind our guests today that peaceful protest is welcome in this House. However, violence or verbal outbursts will not be tolerated, as there are violations of House rules. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. A little over 1 year ago, there was widespread tension on the situation in Ethiopia. A cessation of hostilities agreement was reached between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, bringing an end to the intense conflict. This hearing serves to examine the status of cessation of hostilities agreement implementation and more broadly the U.S.-Ethiopia bilateral relationship. A stable Ethiopia is good for the Horn of Africa and important to broader strategic U.S. interests in the region. However, I'm very concerned about Ethiopia's current trajectory and the direction of our policy. The high expectations that began in 2019, including awarding a Nobel Peace Prize to expand and deepen bilateral relationship with Ethiopia, can still be met. But recent challenges by leadership in Ethiopia and challenges including greater conflict in the region and global economic shocks have clouded Ethiopia's journey. In particular, the war in Tigray, current conflict in Amara and Oromia, direct comments regarding Ethiopia's so-called existential right to port access and an increasing posture away from the United States has eroded some of the optimism in Ethiopia's democratic future and raised fundamental questions about Ethiopia's economic and long-term political stability. These conflicts and their aftershocks have exposed the deep divisions present in Ethiopian society. Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki continues to undermine cessation of hostilities agreement as his troops remain in Ethiopia, troops that have committed massacres, rapes, and other human rights violations and atrocities. Meanwhile, countries like China and the United Arab Emirates have established extensive economic ties with Ethiopia, ties that increasingly are moving into political and security space. Reports widely indicate that weapon systems provided by UAE, among others, were a decisive factor in the Tigray conflict, and it appears that Ethiopia is leading an increasingly rapid regional arms race. Additionally, just 3 months ago, the government of Ethiopia accepted an invitation into the BRICS country grouping. Economically, Ethiopia is struggling with unchecked inflation, a severe foreign currency shortage, and a sinking credit rating. Without support from international financial institutions, it's expected that Ethiopia is at risk of defaulting on its nearly $30 billion in external debt. In this, and seemingly only this, Ethiopia looks west for our money and is relying on International Monetary Fund staff-level agreements to stabilize its economy. The American taxpayers are tired of being used, and we hope to have some of our questions answered here today. Beyond the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam, which represents a critical piece of infrastructure for Ethiopia to reach its developmental goals, it's really hard to see other areas of optimism. The United States had to suspend life-saving humanitarian assistance for 5 months this year because the government of Ethiopia's complicity in a food aid diversion sham. Last week, negotiations with the Oromo Liberation Army once again did not conclude with an agreement, while the conflict in Amhara has not even reached the negotiating table and still simmers. Implementation and suspension of hostilities agreement in Tigray remains incomplete, and no justice has been served for those brutalized by what some have called the deadliest conflict in the 21st century so far. Last December, just 1 month after the cessation of hostility agreement was signed, and 11 months after Ethiopia's AGOA eligibility was rescinded for gross violations of human rights, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was invited to Washington, D.C. to attend the Africa Leaders Summit. The hearing title is about the promise and the peril of U.S. policy toward Ethiopia. And if I'm being honest, it's increasingly difficult to see where the promise lies. I thank the witnesses for appearing today and look forward to their testimony. Chair, now recognizes Ranking Member for a statement.
Thank you, Chair James and Ambassador Hammer, Deputy Assistant Administrator Beckelman. Thank you so much for testifying before the subcommittee today on the state of U.S. policy towards Ethiopia. Ambassador Hammer, it's great to see you again after welcoming you in San Diego this summer to host the Ethiopian Diaspora Peace Conference and hear the perspectives of different Ethiopian diaspora communities so we can work together towards peace for the country and region. I have to admit, I wish we were in San Diego right now. I am cold, but I'm glad to see you again to further that conversation. I'm so proud to represent San Diego, a community that has a long history of welcoming migrants and refugees, including Ethiopians, with open arms. And San Diego is just a small portion of the United States' strong Ethiopian diaspora, which encompasses hundreds of thousands of immigrants who have close familial, social, and economic ties to Ethiopia, and makes up the second largest African immigrant group in the United States. This hearing is very timely. It's been over 1 year since the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement in Pretoria between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. But we have continued to see ongoing human rights violations in Tigray and across the country, as well as spreading conflict in Amhara, Afar, and Oromia. The war in northern Ethiopia and ongoing conflict have triggered a massive refugee and displacement crisis, even setting a world record for displacements in a single year. We've also seen this disruption of crops and increase in food prices, causing millions in the country to rely on food aid, which was temporarily paused due to its diversion. I'm incredibly relieved that food assistance resumed earlier this month, and I commend USAID's work in securing important reforms to prevent diversion and ensure food reaches those in need. But it was clear when I traveled to Ethiopia in 2021, and it's even more clear today. Many challenges remain to create long-lasting peace, safety, and security. Following the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement, the focus must now be on implementing the rest of the agreement in a thoughtful way, pursuing a credible and inclusive transitional justice process that guarantees accountability for war crimes and ongoing human rights violations, and addressing long-held grievances across the country through an inclusive and transparent national dialogue process to prevent another large-scale war. The United States must also urge all parties to pursue peace processes to address ongoing conflict in Amhara and Oromia. Addressing these root causes from a long-term conflict prevention perspective should be central to U.S. policy toward Ethiopia. And this will require high-level attention and prioritization from the United States and the international community, including cooperation from key regional actors with broad influence like the UAE and Turkey. Ethiopia represents the future of the African continent and is the second most populous African country. It has the potential to be a stabilizing force for the region and across the continent. As it experiences high inflation and economic stressors since the war, it is now more important than ever to invest in Ethiopia's long-term stability, which must include real accountability and reconciliation among Ethiopians. It's a key national security priority for the United States to keep its attention on Ethiopia and do everything we can to help secure a more promising future for Ethiopians. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you all about prospects for long-term peace and stability and how the United States can be best positioned to support Ethiopians in this pursuit, which will be critical for the region and the broader continent. Thank you. I go back.
Thank you very much. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. And echoing my ranking member's sentiments, I'm very, very pleased to have you here today. The Honorable Mike Hammer is Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Bureau of African Affairs, U.S. Department of State. Tyler Beckerman is Deputy Assistant Administrator, Bureau for Africa, U.S. Agency for International Development. I thank you again each for being here today. Your full statements will be made a part of the record, and I'll ask each of you to please keep your spoken remarks to about 5 minutes in order to allow for more questions. I now recognize Mr. Hammer for his opening statement. Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you, Chairman James, Ranking Member Jacobs. It is a pleasure to see you both again. And I welcome the opportunity to discuss U.S. policy and interests in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa with you and the distinguished members of the subcommittee, as well as other members who have come here today because of their interest in Ethiopia. I also want to recognize the Ethiopian diaspora, which is extremely active and which, of course, cares very deeply about events in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, as you have said, Mr. Chairman, is a strategically important country. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to working to promote peace, democracy, and economic development for the benefit of all Ethiopians, the broader region, as well as the American people. Our long-term goal is to support policies and reforms that will enable greater partnership between our two countries. During my tenure as Special Envoy, the administration has focused on bringing an end to conflicts in Ethiopia and reducing tensions around the filling operation of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, otherwise known as GERD. Following the November 2022 Cessation of Hostilities Agreement, the COHA, between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, we have been focused on the agreement's implementation while impressing upon the Ethiopian government the importance of dialogue and negotiation as a path to resolving ongoing violence in Oromia and Amhara. And we regularly engage with Ethiopian diaspora to explain U.S. policy, encourage civil discourse, and foster reconciliation among all ethnicities and regions. As we pursue these policies with our colleagues at USAID and the interagency, we absolutely prioritize our responsibility to U.S. taxpayers. In Pretoria, I was proud to represent the United States as an active observer in the African Union facilitate talks that led to the COHA. Within 48 hours of the signing, it silenced the guns and ended a horrific two-year war that killed hundreds of thousands and caused untold suffering, including from horrific acts, sexual and gender-based violence. Since its signing, the United States has supported efforts to implement all aspects of the COHA, among them transitional justice, accountability, protection of civilians, and respect for human rights, including by funding of international human rights observers. As Secretary Blinken said during his visit this last March, to avoid future conflicts arising from past grievances, it is important, essential, to account for the war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other human rights abuses and violations committed in the context of Ethiopia's conflicts. Shortly after his visit, the Secretary announced his determination that all sides have committed horrific atrocities in the northern conflict, and that ensuring accountability will be a key element of our policy towards Ethiopia. As part of our commitment to accountability, the State Department has supported the work of the Transitional Justice Working Group of Experts, an independent body with a nationwide mandate. This working group held 60 consultations throughout Ethiopia to gather views from affected communities on the desire for justice, truth, reparations, and institutional reform. We look forward to the working group's recommendations, and we will work with the Ethiopian government, civil society, and the victims including survivors of the conflict-related sexual violence on their implementation on the implementation of their recommendations. Over the last year, we have seen significant progress. For example, independent monitors have reported a dramatic decrease in human rights violations and abuses in Tigray. However, much more needs to be done. Eritrean forces have not fully withdrawn from Ethiopia. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, DDR, of the Tigrayan forces is lagging, and the status of contested areas remains unresolved. Therefore, implementation of COHAP remains a work in progress. And we are deeply concerned about the ongoing violence in Amhara and Oromia. There have been credible reports of gross violations of human rights, significant loss of life, and severe economic disruption. We have urged all actors to refrain from violence and hate speech and to protect civilians, and we have offered to support or participate in mediation efforts. In fact, I returned this last week from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where the U.S. participated in talks between the Ethiopian government and the Oromo Liberation Army. We reiterated to all involved that there are no military solutions to the complex challenges posed by these situations. Compounding these challenges, Ethiopia is also confronting macroeconomic pressures. Foreign exchange reserves are at the lowest in 2 decades. Inflation has averaged over around 30% for the last 2 years. So the IMF is in discussions with the government of Ethiopia over concerns about the state of the economy. Regarding the GERD, we are encouraged that there are diplomatic negotiations underway between the parties, and the United States remains actively diplomatically engaged to support those parties in achieving an agreement that benefits Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, as well as the region writ large. In closing, let me reiterate my appreciation to this committee for your commitment and counsel. Rest assured that we are clear-eyed about the challenges in Ethiopia as we work to support an Ethiopia that is more peaceful and prosperous, one in which the United States and Ethiopia can benefit from a strong partnership. Thank you, and I look forward to your insights, recommendations, and to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer. I now recognize Mr. Beckelman for his opening statement.
So in this brief program, I just want to highlight what has been discussed and what are the sticking points from this meeting. Concerning the conflict in Oromia, Ambassador Mike Hammer said he participated in the negotiations in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and he emphasized that there is no military solution to the conflict. And he said he urged both sides to find a peaceful solution to the conflict. And when it comes to conflicts in the Amhara region, the chairperson, Mr. James, also stated that there is an ongoing conflict in the Amhara region, and that has not been brought to the negotiation table yet, and it's simmering and it's ongoing right now. And there was a lot of emphasis on the war and human rights violations that happened in Tigray over the last 2 years, and the situation of the human rights situation in Tigray at this moment after the Pretoria Accord. And they emphasized there was a lot of development, a lot of improvement. Humanitarian organizations have been allowed to enter into Tigray, and but still they emphasize that the human rights abuses and the fatalities that happened in Ethiopia over the last few years has no comparison in the world. They even compared it to Gaza and emphasized that the war that happened in Ethiopia over the last few years has killed more people than in Gaza. But they criticized international media for not emphasizing what has happened in Ethiopia. But there has been a continuous daily reporting on the war that's happening between Israel and Palestine. There is a lot of emphasis on that. But when it comes to what happened in Ethiopia, there was no adequate emphasis. So there was a criticism of international media as well as the countries and policymakers concerning their reaction to what has happened in Ethiopia. And some of the members asked Ambassador Mike Hammer and the USAID's Deputy Assistant Administrator Tyler Bickelman, and concerning whether there is a pattern of human rights violation that's going on in Ethiopia. And Ambassador Mike Hammer said, we are still investigating and we can't at this moment say there is a pattern. Based on my view of what is happening in Ethiopia, especially in Oromia, there is obviously there is a pattern of human rights violations. All political opponents are almost detained or they are killed. People are indiscriminately being killed in Oromia state. And this is an ongoing and very clear pattern of human rights violations. There is no tolerance, political tolerance of perceived opponents when it comes to the Ethiopian government, and almost the political opponents or perceived political opponents are targeted and extrajudicially executed. A number of notable people have been killed in the central area, in the capital, as well as in Adama, for example. A judge was killed, and a number of Oromo political activists and those people who are perceived by the Ethiopian government as its opponents have been jailed and taken out of jails and executed by the Ethiopian military. And this has been a very clear and consistent pattern of human rights violations targeted against the Oromos, especially those who are perceived to be members of or supporters of the Oromo Liberation Front, and members and supporters of or sympathizers of the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army. So I don't know whether the U.S. Foreign Committee is just hesitant not to define the human rights violations in Ethiopia as a clear pattern of human rights violation, and I don't know what criteria they are using to categorize it as a clear pattern of human rights violation. And that is one of the takes or I was intrigued by why they have not defined it as a clear human right, a clear pattern of human rights violation. And they discussed a number of things, including the Ethiopian government's use of drone to kill citizens. The Abiy Ahmed has said that they are signing on every assassination, every murder of Ethiopians using the drones, and he and other high-ranking members of the Ethiopian government are behind all the drone attack in Oromia and elsewhere. The drone attack has not been limited to the war that happened between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. The drone attack is consistently being taking place in Oromia. The Ethiopian government had brutally murdered people in the market, in Mandi, in Bila. Students have been assassinated. Students have been massacred in Bila, and in several zones, in several districts in central Oromia, in Shawa, in Metawalkite, in Adabarga, in Kamise, and other parts of central Oromia. The Ethiopian government has, of course, as Abiy said, and then it was reported today by Ethio forum that Abiy Ahmed said he has been watching and all the killings and has been signing for every assassination or every drone attack on their targets. The government and his government is signing, and Abiy Ahmed said they are signing. And the drone attack is consistently taking place. And just last week, a few weeks ago, when the negotiation was taking place in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, the Ethiopian government tried to intensify its military operations against the OLA. And after its lose and was defeated, and his forces were defeated and pushed out of Bedele, the government conducted an aerial attack using drones, killing over 20 children, mostly school children. And so at this moment, the Ethiopian government is conducting drone attack on Oromo civilians, and Abiy has stated that he has been signing on this, and he's behind all this military attack and aerial attacks, especially using drones and military aircraft. And so the U.S. government has to investigate what type of military operations the Ethiopian government is conducting using the drones that is spying from Turkey and United Arab Emirates, and have come up with some policy and pressure those governments not to continue to sell drones to Ethiopia that the Ethiopian government is using to target civilians. And that's my say. You can watch the whole program, the whole hearing. A lot of members of the committee and other invited guests were speaking and asking questions, and Ambassador Mike and Mr. Tyler Beckelman were responding to questions from the members of the committee. Basically, the U.S. policy at this point is like they are not happy with where the Ethiopia is heading, and not only the human rights, its inclination towards Russia, and especially for political direction and alliance with China is at this moment causing the U.S. to question about the Ethiopian government, and also the human rights, especially the focus is on Tigray, but also Oromia and Amara region have been the hot topics of the today's hearing. And it doesn't look like the U.S. has enough information about the human rights violation that is going on, especially in Oromia and in Amara regions. And the focus was, for some of them, the focus was Amara. For others, they balanced it, and they were eager to hear what is going on in Oromia in terms of the human rights violations. Personally, when I look back at the war that took place between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People Liberation Front and sexual violence that took place against women, now a number of them, thousands of them, are said to have given birth to, pregnancies that took place when the enemy sexually abuse or rape the woman. Some of them have husband, and they are a very bad situation. And imagine that happened to you or family member, and how do you view the child? This child is the child of an enemy that was, conceived during a rape. All the trauma that the woman endured in this situation, and then how do they bring this kid? Can they consider the kid, the child, to be their own? And so the trauma is multifaceted. The woman experienced some form of trauma because of the rape, because of the experience, and it happened by an enemy force. And then when it comes to the children, who are the product of all this violence and rape, they now don't have a father and a father figure in their life. And their mom have that trauma, that experience that she endured at the hands of an enemy force. And so the children and the women are going to deal with this for the rest of their life. Some of them, the husband has to come and discover what has happened, and they have to leave. And all those experiences are really harrowing. And I don't know how a healing can be brought to the people who have endured this. And rightly, the U.S. is focusing on Tigray, but in Oromia and elsewhere, similar things are happening. The Ethiopian government forces are conducting the same thing. There is a daily killing of citizens for no reason. If the Ethiopian government was willing to answer political questions according to the constitution of the country, no war could have taken place. But the Ethiopian government is not willing. A dictator has come into being, and they want to, protect their power indefinitely by force, by military force. And I think today's hearing is a positive event. We'll see if U.S. will do some stuff based on their findings from today's testimony from Mike Hammer and Tyler and the rest of the committee members. You can listen to watch all the proceeding. Go to the U.S. Foreign Affairs Committee, Democrats, and we have included the links to the full content in our today's program. Thank you for watching. This has been Pimpine News Network, and I'm your host, Daniel Debaba.